does not waste the people's money. That is essentially necessary for having a lean government.
Has this been achieved in the last 18 years? Get to know Guyana's People Partnership. Plan for a better today. Together we will.
Thank you once again for joining me on this program, Together We Will. I'm Peter Ramsaroop, and it's a pleasure always to be in your living rooms and wherever you're watching. I got a call the other day that many people are watching it on their mobile telephones and definitely on the internet around the world. So thank you for joining me. Today's discussion is going to center around some economic issues that I believe are critical for our nation in this decade, and how we best implement that with advocating right now with the current administration and things that they should have done and they need to do this year to set us on the road to a better Guyana for this decade to come. And also, you know, what we will do in a new government of national unity. This is election year, as many know, and we're all campaigning for your votes. And your choice will need to be based on issues and which leadership you believe that can implement the plans necessary for you to have a better life in our country and a better life for all of us, for our children especially. So as we discuss these 10 economic issues that I will bring to the table today, I will hold the phone calls till later on in the program to discuss them, and I hope that your thoughts and ideas and comments come around what I will present to you in the next few minutes on the economic vision and some of the programs we believe that must be in place. You know, we all are very, very concerned with the crisis going on in the world today, the Middle East crisis from Libya to Egypt, and how that is affecting cost of living prices right here in our nation. We are concerned with the natural disaster in Japan. You know, so many deaths. We're very, very concerned of how that will impact our country, and we're sympathetic to those people that are suffering, both in Libya, the Middle East, and in Japan, that are suffering both from oppression on one end and natural disaster on the other end. We've got to work more in our nation to ensure that we are prepared. Our political party put out a press release today that talked about the early warning systems. We need to have an early warning system in Guyana, especially on the coastal plains, where we are notified by sirens through our cell phones, through our landlines, that there's a natural potential for an emergency, water over the seawall, rising floods, water in, you know, for example, the Conservancy dam busting and flooding the areas, or intentionally, where the government has said they will move to release water out of the Conservancy into the Mahika area. Those are all things that we need to be notified aggressively on prior to it happening, because some things that we can do to prepare ourselves for those contingencies are necessary. So as we go through our discussion again, keep your phone calls closer to the end of the program, and I'll try to get to them. But one of our first initiative on the economic slate, especially with the rise of fuel costs, we're proposing what we call a E10 policy. As part of our top 10 discussion today, we would like in Parliament to pass what we call an E10 legislation. And that is basically allow a mandatory use of 10% ethanol in our vehicles. This will require that we first expand the sugar industry to produce cane for biofuels. And we have talked about this a lot. What is ethanol? Ethanol helps as part of our fuel for our cars. It's come from many waste products. It will reduce the cost of what we are having to put in our cars today. But we need a E10 legislation so that we can then mandatory have our gas stations having ethanol. We would need to buy the ethanol right now from Brazil, but ultimately we need to be producing ethanol in our country. We have the sugar cane. I've said it many times, coming from Dr. Taran, an economist that said to me, he said, Peter, as you get richer, you don't more sugar, but you use more fuel. So we need to be converting our sugarcane industry, grow more sugarcane for ethanol. That's on our top of our list for this year, that we present that E10 policy, and we allow us to be able to use 10% ethanol, and ultimately go to an E15, E25 policy by the year 2015. We should be at least E15 policy. The second plan definitely is to revitalize our coconut industry. One of the things that you find in Guyana is we have many, many different industries that we can revitalize. We've got the agriculture sector as on a whole, but our coconut industry has gone down. If you go to Pomeroon right now, those areas are uncultivated. The coconut industry on the East Coast, Mahaika area, are all not in the shape they should be. We need to revitalize that industry because there are many things that come out of that coconut industry. You know, we know about the coconut water, and we know about coconut other products in terms of coconut milk, but there are wastes. For example, the coconut shell can be turned into what we call mulch. That coconut mulch is used around the world to put in your gardens. It's a natural, organic. That coconut also, the fiber is used, you know, for hanging baskets in Guyana, but that fiber is used for building of roads around the world. You know, they put a layer of that coconut fiber before they put the cement and other aspects of building that road. So the coconut industry is very, very important for us to revitalize in our nation. The next one we have talked about many times on the program, and the number 3 is the paving of the road to Brazil. That's a must this year. It should have been a must last year. It should have been a must a year before. What is that going to do for us? The fact that say Lethem and Linden will be major commercial zones. You would see those two communities suddenly expand. And you know, if you've been to Linden lately, that's a depressed community. Linden will be turned into a manufacturing hub, given that road to Brazil is done and some other components in place. You know, we can go into manufacturing of furniture, refrigerators, glass, bricks. You know, medium-sized and realistic aluminum factories based on energy that could come from some of the smaller waterfalls at Tiger Hill. So that road to Brazil becomes an important factor in our economic vision and economic plan for this decade. And we need to start that definitely this year in order to energize those two communities between Linden and Lethem and start creating a whole new city that we will find some of our coastal plains moving to in the beautiful lands of our interior in the Rupununi area that can produce some significant revenue for our country. The next one basically is a stoppage of our Amalia Falls project. And the reason we say that is a capital project, and I think it needs to be part of a 10, 15-year-old vision, but we will not see the Amalia Falls project probably in the next 10 years. The road is not even completed, much less the start of money for that project. Guyana as a whole needs about 120 megawatts of power. The Amalia project caters for over 800 megawatts of energy. We don't need all of that energy in Guyana right now, so spending all of that money to produce 800 megawatts of energy when we really only need 120, we need to look at it completely different. The cost of moving those transmission lines from the Amalia project all the way to the coastal plains will be a tremendous cost and a lengthy project. I believe it's a good capital project to keep on the books, but we need to relook at how we bring energy quicker to some of the communities that we need energy too. So we need to look at other energy such as wind and solar power. And going to that in number 5, and as you look at integrate these economic plans, you know, we talk about Linden, we talk about Lethem. Now if we move to the Essequibo Islands, Wakenham and Legawan, if we were to put wind energy in those areas, suddenly we may want to move out the coastal plains and move to Wakenham, a beautiful island, or Legawan, to develop those areas better. You know, we've spent a lot of money over the last 2 years building airports, when that money should have gone in building energy, wind energy for those communities. And with that, we could have had development in agro-processing, because a lot of those are farming communities, and you would have found jobs being created right in those local communities. So again, as we put a hold to the Amalia project, we're not saying let's stop the energy building. We're looking at the coastal plain solar power. We're looking at wind energy for Leguan, and then we reallocate money instead of, the priority should be, instead of building the airport, which you have no products to bring out with the airport, put the energy, then you would have products, then you build the airport. So that's a better way of looking at those communities. If we now move to Bartica, the Bartica Triangle area, one of the most areas that produce a significant revenue through gold and other products coming out of the Bartica Triangle. We believe we must fuel that area with a smaller hydro, which comes from the Bakacara Falls and some of the other falls in that area, that we need to expand the Bartica community, the Bartica Triangle area. Again, so as you look at Linden, Lethem, Bartica, you look at the Essequibo Islands, Wakenham and Leguan, Parika area, you suddenly start, because you're putting emphasis on energy, those areas can be developed, and the Bartica Triangle becomes an important aspect to the gateway of the city. You know, again, we know about the increase in gold prices. We know what is happening in Bartica area. If we can develop that into a prosperous town, a prosperous community that again could become a financial sector of our nation, we can do much better in pushing our population out throughout the country in order to create jobs at the local level. It's all about jobs, jobs, jobs at the local level. You know, you shouldn't have to travel from those areas to come to the city to have a public servant job or to find areas. So definitely Bartica is one of our key locations. The Bartica Triangle is a key location that we're looking at. Number 7 in my top 10 today talks about legislation for a state development bank. Why do we need a state development bank? We need to be able to infuse some of our capital into development of new industries. There's a lot of things that entrepreneurship is big in our country. We need to look at, again, if we go back to one of the things we talked about earlier in the top 10 about the agro industry in the coconut, you know, if you put investment into that, and you can turn that coconut industry in a viable industry through a state development bank, that you would have the ability to look for loans in that particular area, you can see a radical change. You know, factories that would produce that fiber in order to export that fiber, or that mulch. A bag of mulch, a bag of coconut mulch in the United States sells for over $12 to $15 a bag. Imagine we waste all that coconut husk in Guyana. So definitely a state development bank that put emphasis on producing money for entrepreneurship in critical industries can see us moving towards a prosperous nation as we go forward. The next one switches to education, and where do we create a national legislation? I mean, before that, the legislation for artists and inventors. You know, we know that when you go to a CD store, for example, you're buying a CD copy, you know, from a local artist that probably don't get any of that money. We need to create some new industries in our country, and I believe our artists and inventors ought to be taken care of. We need to be able to reactivate the cinemas and theaters. We need some social entertainment, and I think legislation towards that will create a new economic environment that we will produce better artists and inventors around Guyana and around the Caribbean and around the world. We have brilliant people here, but we're not treating them well because our legislative is not in place to protect their rights. The number 9 in my top 10 economic is for us to create a national science and technology policy. You know, we've got to move to our UG in order to look at how we can do this better. We need to be able to put capital infusion in terms of scientific and research capacity at UG. This will start to put our people thinking about our future. You know, what should be our policies, and how do we look at science and technology? We know we have the potential of oil in Guyana. We're not far away from that. Report says we potentially have more oil than Kuwait, over 500,000 barrels of oil. And so Guyana is on the verge of prosperity. And one of the things I advise all of us, don't not be involved in the electoral process this year. If you put that kind of money, oil industry, in the wrong hands of a government, we will suffer for the rest of our lives. And we're appealing to you, pay attention to the leadership discussion. If you have seen a corrupt government so far in our country, and we're about to strike oil that puts more revenues in our land, we need to really consider who should be part of a new government. But the research and science and technology is very, very important for the future of our country. We need to educate our children. We need to ensure that we're thinking through, why don't we have the next Facebook idea in our country? Why don't we have the next Microsoft? Those are things that we can generate if we put capital infusion in UG and focus on science and research. We've got a lot of health issues that we can find cures to some illness through our tropical diseases and stuff that we have. We don't always need to buy the solution from others. And in the last, I think the top 10, in the last, what I want to focus on the education side, is our education in the business side at UG. We need a vocational training. It's not just about UG and the tertiary education, but we need to create a business school in order to train people how to be better business managers. But we need to get back to vocational training in carpentry, masonry, plumbing, electrical. When we used to have the multilateral schools, a lot of people learned some of those things in a multilateral school. We need more technical schools where folks can go and learn that. And I think we ought to put back in a national civil service in our country where we allow young students that may not be able to afford a tertiary education to be able to learn some of these trade, and instead of putting money in one contractor's hand to build roads, why not create a national service, create a national civil service, train our people in those areas, and use that money to pay them. And now what would that do? That would create some significant jobs. If we were building those roads with a national service where you would have learned masonry and carpentry and you would have been repairing the schools, instead of giving 5 people in the country those contracts, I think we ought to look at how do we distribute that money so all of us can have a chance of getting decent jobs to take care of our family. So those are the top 10. As we look at the education, we look at the economics, we look at revitalizing some of our industries. We look at paving the road to Brazil. We look at creating sugar to ethanol. As we put those things together, the outcome is tremendous. It's about jobs, 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 and jobs. That's what you will see. So as we do those incentives and we do those programs, at the same time we will be reducing taxes in terms of the VAT definitely will go from 16% to 8 to 10%. The income tax threshold will be raised to 75,000. Old age pension and other areas in our tax system, our corporate tax will reduce from 40% to 10% profit tax. And what that will do to our economy is to create that new incentive where more money will be flowing in our system. And what would I do with that money? I'm going to expand my business. I will then go maybe in that coconut industry, or I will be wanting to build a business on the road to Brazil from Linden to Lethem, or open that manufacturing plant in Lethem or in Linden where we can build refrigerators again, or bricks as we used to do in the early days. Those are all things that will create jobs for our country. So our economic vision, the top 10 that I put up today, we can go over those in another program. But the fact is, it's you and I getting involved in paying attention to our nation's economic situation, putting the right leadership in place. I'll go through them quickly. We believe in presenting in Parliament an E10 legislation where we mandatory use 10% ethanol today. We may need to import it from Brazil, probably at a very low cost. That will reduce the cost of our gasoline in our cars, and maybe our bus fares wouldn't go up. and we convert our sugar industry, grow more sugar cane, but turn it into biofuels. The second one we talked about is revitalizing the coconut industry. It's a key industry. There are many other industries that need to be revitalized, but this probably brings a significant value given our land mass in our nation. 3, we need to look at paving the road to Brazil. Definitely new communities. For every exit off of that road, a new village will go up. We'll have gas stations, we'll have hotels, we'll have trucking and shipping industry being created, we'll have mechanic shops. So the tremendous fall in of that road alone will bring significant economic revenue to all of us, from job opportunities to moving some of our coastal plains out to those areas. And as we look at other areas in terms of our fourth economic plan, we talked about the Amalia Falls project, put a hole in that, modernize some of our smaller hydro waterfalls, put hydro in our smaller waterfalls so communities like Bartica and all those other areas can have energy that will then create new projects, new businesses in those areas that can then create those jobs. Number 5, we talked about the energy for Leg 1, wind energy. Those places have lots of wind. If we put wind energy in Leg 1 and Wakenham, those areas then can concentrate on agro-processing. They can be manufacturing some of the rice and other things that they grow in those areas into final products that then could be sold as value products throughout the world, and more money will come into the system, and more money, and that's more money for us. So we are asking the government not to waste their monies on airports and those things. Let's do it in order. Put the energy, create the opportunities for people to do business right, and then build the transportation system in order for them to get those items out of the country. Number 6, we talked about the Bartica Triangle, a big community. Gold has gone up. There's many waterfalls in those areas that can fuel energy. We can then expand that Bartica Triangle as a major hub for a financial zone for our country. Number 7, I think we talked about the state legislation for State Development Bank in order to have capital infusion, in order for us to be able to fund some of these projects we talked about for you, the entrepreneurship to you. So if you have a coconut industry right now that you plan to expand, we would want as a State Development Bank to work with you in order for us to make that progress in that industry. Number 8, I think we focus back on the social sector of our society, legislation to protect our artists and inventors that will help us reactivate the cinnamon industries in our country. Those are key areas that, again, puts back social components, but also protect the rights of one of our key entrepreneurs in our country, the artists and other inventors. Number 9, we talked about creating a national science and technology policy, where we are looking at research and science more at the UG level. We need to be able to create the next Facebook idea in our country. We have to do a lot of research in terms of science and health, especially solving some of our tropical diseases that we find in our country. So we need to put money back into those areas that will expand that. And the last one, we talked about refocusing on our technical training. Apart from opening a business school at UG, we talked about vocational training, the proposal back for a national service in our country, where we expand our, instead of giving the contractor that opportunity to build the road, we will train people without jobs for plumbing, electrical, masonry, and other areas in our country. So I hope within those areas you can focus on how do we integrate those plans for a better country. How do we work on ensuring those things happen? And all of us know that leadership and management and measuring what you do is a key component of that implementation. We talked about the oil industry, that we're about to strike oil in our nation. You don't want, if you look at Nigeria, for example, one of the richest oil countries, they're full of corruption, and they're still a very poor country, even though they're one of the richest countries when it comes to oil. Guyana has to make sure that we change our leadership in order not to give these current people managing our country, the ability to manage our oil. And we have proposed also that a good portion of oil revenues come back to us, the people. It's like what they call the 401k in the North America, where you get part of that money. I think in Alaska, some of that money goes back to the citizens. All the land in Guyana is our land. It's not the government's land. So they shouldn't have the right to take away land from us or do what they want with the land. The land is our land. So if we drill for oil and we have a 60% revenue base coming back into the national treasury, we are recommended that a portion of that comes into our bank account. Now there will be rules and regulation that goes with that. You would be able to use that money for education, for investments in business opportunity. If you take it out and spend it wisely, you'll be taxed at a very, very high rate. So those are all new wave ideas that needs to be in place as we look at the potential oil industry in our country. I was going to take your phone calls, but I know we're running out of time. But let's concentrate on those 10 initiatives. Let's look at the plans necessary for this decade. How do we move our nation forward? How do we put those implementation of those plans are not easy. And as I mentioned with the Amalia Falls project, if we have spent 2 years trying to even just construct the road, which is only 20% completed, how are we going to be able to see the electricity costs go down when you know fuel prices are on the rise? So we are recommending we hold that capital project, we put it as a long-term capital project, bring it back to the local hydro plants, invest in solar power, invest in wind power, look at our industries around our country, look at the key areas we want to develop again, Linden, we want to develop Lethem, we want to develop Parika, we want to develop Bartica, Wakenham, Legawan, and then look at the Hog Island as one of our potential financial hubs that can see offshore banking and some of the other areas. So as we look at the crisis going on around the world, let's use that to our advantage. We don't have a lot of money in our country, we know that, but you have to allocate your money in priority. As I said, spending money building the airports at Wakenham and in Madhya were not the things we need to do right now. If we had invest in reduction in wind power or solar power in those two areas, get the jobs created, get the industries in place, at the same time put on your capital project that you will build that airport, then the transport economics, as we call it, will be in place. So you're putting it in order to build the airport first without reducing the energy costs to create the new manufacturing that needs to happen in other areas doesn't make sense. So we've got to look at, again, those components in terms of managing the finances of our country. And Dr. Jagdeo, who's on his way out, have had an opportunity to put some of these things in place. These are not new ideas. We've proposed them over the years, and we're proposing it again. This is a new decade. And in this decade, we are at a critical juncture. Our children, 60% of our population is below the age of I think, 28, some of the new numbers are saying. We don't want to create such a country that they can inherit anything good in the next 10 years. So if we don't put some of these incentives in place today, we will not be able to see those benefits for those of our children that will require it 10 years from now. So with that, I hope that you have studied what I've mentioned on this program. It would be live on the web again, tomorrow. You can relook at this broadcast. I didn't get a chance to take your phone calls, but I ask you, pay attention to this year. It's a critical year. Pay attention to the programs that we're proposing. We believe in a government of national unity. We believe in a broad approach to managing our country. We do not believe in a one-party rule. We believe the Constitution must change. We believe in a Guyanese dream that says we want the basic things in life. We want the chance of a decent home, to have a decent home, a decent job, free school transportation for children, the ability to create new entrepreneurship opportunities.